Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Murder on the Orient Express 2017. I say that simply because there has been a number of just remakes and redos of Murder on the Orient Express. There's so many other things that this movie has gone on and done at some point. I'm going to go on and talk about Murder on the Orient Express, and then I'm going to also talk about Death of the Nile kind of in the same breath within this here. So I'll talk about this first and then transition to talking about Death of the Nile, because I had gone on and watched like half of that film, and so like I figured I would go on and like have a little talk about that film after I kind of go and do the very much kind of cliff notes of this film. So, Murder on the Orient Express. This movie is to be a whodunit film that, of course, has a really good ensemble cast. That we're going on and like, okay, like, so we can't easily figure out who the murderer is because, like, normally the murderer would be like, well, whoever the biggest star is, or whoever would be, of course, the character that we know ends up playing a certain kind of role, so on and so forth. It feels like this movie goes on to try to make the person you would probably least expect the person you would be probably to be expecting at this point. Because we have Hercule that kind of breaks down every single character and is to start to find out the real truth behind everyone. And we also have Hercule Pirat, who is, or Poirat? I'm going to butcher that name, so I'm just going to call him Hercule for the rest of this film, or the rest of this review. So, we have, of course, this Sherlock Holmes kind of character that is to see little details about a certain character and is to know some things about them by like possibly like calluses on their hands or something like that, to just like, oh hey, like you must be a weightlifter, you must be a so and so person, you must be a boxer because your hands are kind of very battered. So kind of really interesting thing to kind of see, like these little tiny little things that we of course have Hercule that kind of finds out little details about these characters. So I would say that this movie is to overall be very it's good because this movie doesn't waste time. This movie goes on and gives you like a really interesting kind of play out of story. And I already knew the end result of this movie because, of course, I have seen a Murder on the Orient Express before. So I kind of figured what the end result was, but I didn't really remember how the movie overall played out. So I had my suspicions about certain characters, and I was thinking, like, okay, like, how is this going to be connected? Who's going to be the person? Who's going to have this be like the character or the characters or the culprits or whatever. So it's kind of funny in this movie because it feels like we have a reveal in this movie just to turn around and not really have a reveal. Like it seems like we have this it seems like we have an answer, but then no, no, you're wrong. It still isn't exactly a real legitimate answer. I'm like, what? Like, that seems weird. But yeah, so I had fun with this movie, and so I would tell anybody to go out of your way to see this film, because it is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, suspicion, and whatever. And you have this character that's starting to pull like these little details about a certain person, and it's like, oh, how did you know that? Oh, from this little thing, because we have Hercule that like he can't help but like go on and find these little details. And I think it's a character that probably like I would assume this guy would have like a horrible amount of problems with like sleeping at night, because this guy like every little detail like he has to poke out and mention about them, and he just can't help it. And immediately he knows who the bad guy is and who the good person is, or just who a person is via any shade of day of whatever. So with that said, let's go on and let's talk about the death of the Nile. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. Like, I'm not going to go into much spoilers because I honestly only watched half of the film. I was like 15 minutes in and I was like, yeah, no. Death of the Nile has a way seemingly lesser cast. Not meaning quality lesser. I'm just saying that it feels like, whereas this movie is to have like an actual like team and like everybody feels important, in Death of the Nile we have seemingly one person who is to be built up so much so that this person is kind of like the key character, and everybody else is just like, man, I wish I could be as great as that character. And I'm just like, I couldn't stand any more of that, where it's just like, no, like and plus also I was like, where's the mystery in this movie? Like, can we like hurry this up? Like, could we speed up this movie? I'm like, come on, like we're already halfway through, and like I want to see somebody dead by now, and we don't. Uh, and then I feel like this movie is going to get like rushed when it comes down to who could it be, who could have quite possibly been the person that has to be questioned. Like, I like it when a whodunit movie is to take its sweet time with giving you a number of options. I don't like it when you have a whodunit movie where you have it where like they take forever to actually get to the death part. I actually like a whodunit movie where the death part is in the early part of the film, and so the rest of the movie is like, okay, let's figure this out, Watson. Let's go on and solve this case. I like that's what I think is just like the worst thing of a mystery film. It's like, oh yeah, like let's do the whodunit thing like a third way through the film, and no one will care by then because they'll have just watched a movie that is just so like uneventful. So, with that said, that's really my thoughts on the death of the Nile. I was just like, man, I didn't also see this movie, so I thought I would go on and watch it finally for the first time, because I felt like I already knew the answer, but like I just wanted to see how this played out, and it just felt like an overall better film than its sequel. So that's sad. They just put together a sequel that was just like, like let's chuck this out here. Uh, I really think that that movie was only built up because, like, basically they just said, like, hey, Gal Gadot's in this movie, and that's all that matters. Basically, when you see, like, the posters of the film, they just kind of show the boat and, and Death of the Nile, and that's their poster for the film. I'm like, oh, okay, so this movie doesn't have as big as an ensemble cast as this movie obviously does, and either that or it doesn't have like as much star power as this first one does. So eventually the sequel will probably just go in obscurity. But if they pop out a third one, I will be surprised. But especially with how things are kind of going right now, like putting this film out here now doesn't really exactly make sense. But when will it ever be? So, sadly enough, I'm just being honest. So yeah, let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into spoilers about this film. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So the movie opens with, of course, Hercule going to Jerusalem to solve a case. I guess there, of course, is to be a rabbi, priest, and a ram, kind of all like priesthoods that are to all supposedly have a crime being done. And so, really, this crime is to, of course, be about a theft. And so, we have Hercule who is to go on and figure out this case because they are, of course, right by the Wailing Wall. And so, the Wailing Wall, of course, if people don't know, because of course maybe they don't remember this in school, the Wailing Wall is, of course, a thing where some people would go up against this Wailing Wall and pray to it, or confess things to it, or something like that. It's basically just like a wall of prayer, I believe, for some Jerusalem people, from what I remember. So, like, the Wailing Wall does have significant value, and it's kind of cool for them to have brought this story here for the Wailing Wall, because if people don't know of its importance, it does actually have importance in Jerusalem. So, we have Hercule that goes and is to figure out who the culprit is out of everybody, and coincidentally, it's the exact same guy that was to send Hercule on this case, who of course was the British police chief inspector, was the guy who was to go on and put this whole thing together and do this crime. And so we go on and have Hercule send some other detective off to go and find this this stolen artifact. And so they're like, yep, like he did it. Like, so we have, of course, this guy going on and being like chased out. And so eventually this guy is to be caught, arrested, so on and so forth. Let's push on. So we are, of course, to have Hercule going and transitioning to Istanbul to, of course, make it onto a train to head back home. So we are, of course, making our way with these characters to have, I think, Miss Mary de Belham, de Benham, the girl who, of course, is to be this character right here. We kind of see both Hercule and Miss Mary go and meet up with one another at some point. And we immediately have it where Hercule, who of course is this man right here, who is going on and talking to her and kind of catching up and like, hey, like, I guess you were in Baghdad. And she's like, well, how do you know that? And he's like, well, because you have a thing that says Baghdad right there. She's like, oh. And so we, of course, have Hercule that's kind of starting to pick out things about this woman and so on and so forth, knowing things about her and so on and so forth. So we transition to this train that we have Hercule being involved in. And so before we get there, I want to get to some funny parts of the beginning of this movie that I kind of really heavily skipped out about. Excuse me. So we had Hercule at the very beginning of this film who is to desperately want his breakfast, and so I guess at his breakfast he is to eat 2 different eggs, but they have to be the exact same size. And so every time they are to grab these eggs, they continue to go and find out that these eggs aren't identical, that they're different. And so we have Hercule that is to go on and just say that these people can go and have these eggs because he just can't eat them because they're not the same. So We also go on and have Hercules that is walking through the part of Jerusalem, and he accidentally steps in, I would believe, horse crap, um, or maybe it's camel crap. Not quite sure. But all of a sudden, we have Hercules who steps in it with one foot, and they're going like, "Oh my God! Well, I'm sorry that you stepped in it." And Hercules is like, "Well, no. Since now that I've gone on and stepped in it with one foot, now I just need the consistency." And so Hercules goes on and steps with now both feet into this crap and then walks off. And I'm like, "Oh my God!" I had a good chuckle about that because I thought that was funny. But like when you have it, like this character has to have it be like everything has to be equal, everything has to be perfect, and so like I get that. Or otherwise this guy just loses sleep at night because he isn't like perfectly uh, like symmetrical or whichever for everything. Because this guy is just like very like particular about things. So like we can kind of assess like a detective like Monk was kind of the same way, where we have it where the guy like would never shake hands with anybody, or like he was kind of a germaphobe and just kind of afraid of everything, and but he was always good at his cases. So we push on, and we of course have Hercule that is making his way onto this train, where of course he is to uh, meet up with a certain character that he is going to be involved with in the sequels, or the sequel of course these films, which of course was actually to be uh, Boke or Book, Bouc. Man, the pronouncing of these names, I tell you. So we go on into this film, and we, of course, have it where they're talking about prostitutes, and that this guy, of course, is to be getting this prostitute, and that all of a sudden we have uh, Ainsworth, who is trying to get Hercules into yet another case, and we of course have uh, Hercules that it's like, dude, I'm done with cases. I just did one. Like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to do any more of these. But we kind of have just Hercules just kind of pushing these cases to the point of him just like, dude, I just want to run off. I just want to sneak off somewhere. So So we go on, and we of course have it where Hercules is to make it onto this train, and so we go on and we have him onto this train where we are to meet a certain cluster of people that are to make their way on this train, and so Hercules, who is just kind of stuck on this train last minute, and he is to be pushed to live with Hector McQueen and or bunk with him because they're like there's just an odd number of stuff. So we go on to this story and have, of course, Hercule, who is to be in this train, and so we of course start to have Hercules start to meet people. We of course have him meet up with Edward Ratchet, who is to be this kind of very like gangster kind of guy who is to kind of force people to do what he wants them to do, kind of thing, or he's basically going to point a gun at them. And so we have Edward talking to Ratchet, and we have we have Hercule talking to Edward Ratchet here, and we have him wanting to get to pay this detective to really just watch over Edward, because this guy is a really good inspector. He's very famous, and so might as well like have this guy go on and watch over Ratchet, of course, so he'll be safe. And Hercules is like, no. As they're kind of going on and eating this dessert together, we of course have Hercules who's like, no, like, because like I feel like you're a very like I feel like you're a bad man, and why would I go on and want to protect a bad person, kind of thing. So, and plus also we have Ratchet who kind of pushes a gun from under a handkerchief to kind of prove that point that he is a bad man. So we have Hercules who just kind of walks away from this man. It's like, no, I'm not going to work for you, no matter how much money that you offer me. So Hercules goes on and is to continue to accompany certain guys like Volk throughout this film, because he is to, of course, be the kind of the guy who is to be like the runner of this train kind of thing. So we go on and, of course, have this train who is making its way to a certain location. And all of a sudden, we have at one point, we have this train that is in a really bad wintry spot where all of a sudden there's to be this avalanche that happens, which is to basically stall this train and almost derail it, and like have these characters now stuck. So all of a sudden, since they are all stuck in this one area anyways, we all of a sudden go on and have them realize that Hatchet, of course, is to be killed here. And so now we have it to where Hercules is going on and expecting this body because he can't quite figure out right away who is the killer. So we have Hercules realize that Ratchet had been stabbed wildly numerous times, and that it seems that there is to be this handkerchief that says H on it. And so we start to go around and have Hercules kind of question the people nearby, kind of asking if they were to hear something, see something right around that time, and start to question everybody. So we of course have certain characters that are starting to be questioned. Like, of course, we have Caroline Hubbard that is starting to get questioned about things. Because, of course, Caroline is to be the person that is to be kind of... her room is right next to Ratchet's. And we had both Caroline and we had both Ratchet, who was kind of having this almost like romantic exchange between one another, where we go on and we have or Caroline that's mentioning to Ratchet about her first husband that was a turnip, but she loved that turnip. So we go on and we have them question Caroline, and she is to mention that there was somebody going through her room that was to have some kind of train station outfit, like kind of one of the officers. So they go into that room and they realize that there is actually a button missing, and so they're like, aha! So like her story does like show fruit here. So we also go on and we have, of course, Hercules going on and talking with Ratchet's accountant, who is Hector McQueen, and starting to question him, because if anybody's to probably have easily motive, it'll probably be him. So we have Hector going on, and Hercules is to ask Hector if this guy had any enemies, and of course Hector is like, well, yeah, like of course he had a number of enemies, but like anybody on this train, I wouldn't be able to know or point them out or whatever. So we go on and we start sifting through Ratchet's stuff, because we are starting to reveal that it seems that this guy was to go on and have a number of death threat notes sent to him, and like death threat notes that I guess were like clipped out of some like magazines, it looked like. So we go and we have Hercules who is finding all these notes, and we simply have one note that they couldn't quite make out, and so they had to come up with a scientific way to be able to reread this note. And so we go on and we start to make it out, and it seems that Hercules was to know of a certain case that was to, of course, deal with a Armstrong family. And so we, of course, have this Armstrong family that was to lose their kid, was to lose their child. And so we have Sonia and John Armstrong that I guess had lost their child at some point. And so Hercules was actually supposed to be tied to that case. And so we go on and we find out that that case actually has something to do with this story here, because they go on and they find out that Hercules was to realize that Ratchet was to have actually had been involved in the whole Armstrong case. Where, like, I want to, like, correct what I said before. Like, I feel like there is a missing kids case, but, like, I don't want to guarantee that. But I feel like I remember that part of the film. So we go on and we start to have more suspicions about more characters, to where Hercules is going and talking to Pilar Estevera, or Verados. Esteverados. So, or Pilar, Penelope Cruz's character. He goes on and questions her and realizes that this girl is to have some bruising upon her hands to make it seem like she is into boxing. And this girl is just like, well, that's because the streets of which that I live on aren't always the most secure. And Hercules is like, okay, I can buy that story. So we go further on into this case. And so we, of course, have Edward Henry Masterman, who, of course, is to kind of be brought in here because he's Derek Jacobi in real life, or sure. So we have Hercules going and talking to Edward Henry Masterman, and he's, of course, questioning him about going and like, hey, have you ever been to the United States? And the guy mentions that he only went to Boston once, and then because he wanted to see if he liked America, but then he realized that, like, well, Boston's not really working out. I'm going to go on back to London because things just weren't working out. So nothing really suspicious is really coming from out of Masterman, besides him going on and at some point working with Ratchet, and like Edward was supposed to get his tooth removed soon because Ratchet was just getting really annoyed with Edward consistently wincing in pain because he had a bad tooth. So we go on further into this film, and we, of course, have this Countess Elena Andrely. Sure. Elena. And Perry Mitchell. We go on and find out that this couple, it seems that when they go through their information and their paperwork, we go on and find out that Hercules immediately notices that this girl's name is smudged at some point. And so within the talking of these characters, we find out that this girl is to be taking this medication because she is to have a lot of fears. So she takes this certain medication to kind of like she takes this medication to sleep. She takes this medication to just kind of go anywhere, like because she just has like this horrible fear for some odd reason. So she takes this medication to kind of dull that I guess paranoia or phobia of anything, I guess. So we go on and we have Hercules who's just like, okay, all right. So and so he makes the connection later on that there's a reason why that name is to be smudged, and that this girl's name is not Elena, it's Helena, and that has some tie to the Armstrong family. So we we of course have Princess Dragomirov, who of course has an assistant who's Helder Schmitz. Sure. Who of course would be this lady right here. So we go on and we have Hercule going on and talking to this woman. And so really, if anything, we have Hercule going and talking to her assistant and talking to her in her like native tongue. And we of course have the princess who's kind of like, okay, what are they both saying? And like we have no subtitles what he's actually saying, but like we end up getting the story out of these two characters. So like we end up have like anything that is to kind of be the exchange of both Hercules and the princess, like there isn't much that kind of comes to mind within that interaction, just because it's like it doesn't really make any much difference to me about this character, because she doesn't have much significance in this movie, sadly enough. So we go on and we have Hercules talk to Gerhard Hardman, who of course is Willem Dafoe in this movie. We go on and we have, of course, Hercules talk to this man, and so he at first is say that he is a. It sounds like he is to be a certain accented professor. I believe he is to be a German professor. And so he's going on and talking offensive about certain characters and stuff along those lines. And so Hercules goes on and comes back to this man later and is to find out that actually this guy is to be a fraud, because Hercules is to realize that the one thing that he was going on pronouncing, he pronounced it without an accent, just going like, aha, like I caught you. So we have Hercules go back to this guy later, and we find out that this guy is actually an undercover agent that was working with Ratchet and was trying to keep him safe. And supposedly he was kind of watching through the peak of this door to see if anybody was coming through, and he never really saw anybody come out that night. And so Hercules is just like, well, like considering you lied to us before, like I'm not quite sure if I can believe you now. So we go on and we also have it to where we have a number of people that are continued to be questioned in part of this movie. We also have Dr. Arbuthnot. Arbuthnot? Sure. We have this doctor who seems to be connected to Miss Mary. And so this couple, or this doctor, Hercules is going on to go and talk to this doctor, asking about certain suspicions that he might have about this doctor. The doctor mentions that he, of course, was to work with Armstrong in the past as being in the army with this man, and it's like, like there seems to be some kind of suspicions there that maybe there is to be a real reason for why this guy is to go on and kill this guy. And so we also go back to McQueen, or McQueen in the story, because we go on and we have McQueen who is trying to run away from this train at some point, and Hercules is kind of running after him, not knowing who exactly this is, who's just kind of running off in this kind of cloaked outfit. We go and we have Hercules chase after and catch, of course, McQueen here, and we end up finding out that McQueen for the longest time had been cooking the books. Hector for the longest time had been cooking the books. And so this guy has gone on and stolen thousands of dollars from Hatchet, which could give him the motive to kill this guy off. And so it seems that we go and have it be that Hercules is not wanting to pin this all on Hector, because Hector is to go on and say, it's like, well, like, what real motive do I have? Because in all actuality, like, I need this guy to survive, to continue to give me money, so why would I kill off my prize pig kind of thing? So Hercules is just kind of like, you're right about that. So we go on further into this film and trying to see if there's anything left as far as for me to just divulge within this film. Don't think so. So, or that there has any big other reveals about any number of these characters, which we'll get into in the second half of all this. So we go on and have Hercules, who is to now figure out who the killer is. And so we have Hercules go on and bring Miss May to talk to her again. And so both of them are kind of waiting things out for eventually these guys to get things out of the way, for them to just kind of make it through this tunnel. We also had it at every single point that every single person had some obligation that was going to, of course, now make them late for that obligation to, like, say, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm going and waiting on this specific thing, and hopefully this train conductor or this train person is going to be able to give me some kind of money for the business or the thing that I'm going to be missing out on. So we go in and have Hercules going and talking to Miss May, and so he, of course, is to figure out while talking to her that Hercules is to find out that Miss May does actually have a connection to the Armstrong family, because we, of course, have Hercules who is to have Miss May write out her full name, and we, of course, have Hercules who's like, well, do you use Hermione all that much? And so, or do you have any connection with the Hermione name all that much? So the more and more that Hercules starts pulling at this string with this girl, the more and more he realizes that there's a connection with the Armstrong family, and that Miss May could be the murderer, for all of a sudden the doctor to come out of the shadows with this gun, and is now, of course, telling Hercules that he was the one that did this. He was, of course, tied to the Armstrong man in the army, and so he went off to go and kill Ratchet. And so Hercules is like, well, wait a minute here. So, like, we have this doctor that shoots Hercules in the arm, and so we still have it where Hercules doesn't want to think that this guy is to be the real culprit here. I'm like, dude, he shot you in the arm. So he has every single member like just sit by this tunnel to figure this all out. And so Hercules goes on and is like, you know what? I'm going to figure out now who the culprit really is. And so we go on and we find out that the first suspicious person is to really be Caroline Hubbard. Caroline Hubbard was to kind of ward off suspicion about her when she was have a knife in her back, and so to make it look like someone had done that to her. So that way, I guess it would void suspicion of this girl going on and doing this. We also had Hercules at one point scrambling throughout this train, going on and finding certain numbers of things, of both like the train guy's outfit was actually in Hercules' luggage, and one of the other like costumes was actually in, of course, another person's luggage, which Hercules didn't think it was going to be either. So, in Hildegard Schmidt's luggage, which is to kind of like, oh, okay, so two people that Hercules was like least suspicious of, really himself, was to have these kind of things kind of put into these cases. So we now go on and have Caroline Hubbard, who's to be the main culprit here, but we go on and we have Hercules that says basically that everyone had done it. Everyone has some motive for killing this man, and so every single person all went into that room and one by one went in there and just started stabbing him. Just like everybody just came in because every single one of these people all had ties with the Armstrong family. Like we of course had it where the one guy who had the tooth problem, of course, was to be a driver of the Armstrong family at one point. Of course, we go on further and further down the road here, and every single character was to have some involvement. I think McQueen at some point was a lawyer or accountant for the Armstrong family, and so on and so forth. Or some characters had a family tie to the Armstrong family one way or the other. So we go on and we find out every single person of this train was to be this murderer, killer, whatever. And that's why there were so many stab wounds within this man, because every single person was to go on and take their turn. So we go on and we have Caroline, who gets up and is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, I will go on and I will, like, me alone say that I did it. And let everybody else go. Like, just, like, I'm willing to take this. Like, we go on and even have Caroline, who is to take off her wig, and we find out that she has, like, this long brown hair. It's like, okay. So, but we find out that every single person on this train had done it one way or the other. With the exclusion of Hercules and the guy who is to be, like, the guy who is to be the train guy. Any of the train people, the people that work with the train, are to be pretty much all not be a part of this whole ordeal for the most point. So we go on and of course have Hercules that's telling these people, it's like, well, hey, here's one way that you guys can all get out of this scot-free, is if one of you is to pick up this gun and kill me. If you shoot me, then all of you will be free. So Caroline goes on, and instead of picking up the gun and shooting Hercules, she goes and tries to shoot herself, but the gun isn't loaded. So the gun clicks, and so Hercules is to go on and is, of course, to do the right thing here by basically having, when they get off of this train, we have Hercules going and having this case closed by going and telling all these numbers of people what had all happened, who the culprit was, yada, yada, yada. Because he is to go on and tell this whole group that Ratchet had been murdered by an assailant that made his way off this train. And that everyone, of course, is to be free to go. Because no one was to have killed this person, because everybody in their right mind, I guess, had a reason to go and kill this man, even so much as Hercules does himself. To go on and have some tie that he could have been a part of that Armstrong case, but he decided not to. So really everybody just goes on and leaves this train and goes on to lead their separate lives. To now lead, of course, Hercules to now go to the Death of the Nile case, which I guess is going to be the sequel to this film, which I have no real interest in going on to watching that whole entire film and reviewing it at some point, just because I like that as a movie that really just does not matter to me. I'm not a, like, I'll say it, like, I'm not much of a Gal Gadot fan. And how we just, like, continue to have certain actors and actresses just being consistently put in a movie, and we have to consistently make them such a big part of a film. Like, man, if we ever have, like, Mark Wahlberg in a movie, if we ever have Dwayne The Rock Johnson in a film, if we ever have Gal Gadot now, it seems like those characters are to be so overwhelmingly important to a movie that it's just like, man, like, I would rather go on and watch anybody else in a film besides those three I just named. Um, like, I would just rather go on and enjoy a film that is to either be an ensemble film where it seems like everybody is at an even keel of importance, or I'd like to go on and watch a film where there isn't those three actors in it, just so I can enjoy that there isn't, like, a real uh, important character or important actor. There's sometimes I think also, like, Tom Cruise at some point can fit that bill. Um, but I tend to usually enjoy Tom Cruise's performances through a lot of films that he has gone on and done, because it's very rare to me that you end up seeing a Tom Cruise movie nowadays. Whereas before, like, man, once we did those Mission Impossible movies, like, all of a sudden Tom Cruise was just everywhere. But now it's kind of like you see him in a smaller capacity. Uh, so it's just like, oh, okay, all right. Like, I can go back and want to find a Tom Cruise film to enjoy at some point. But with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. I'm sorry if I wasn't as hugely detailed for a mystery film. I know a lot of people are like, well, he didn't say this, and he didn't go on about this, yada, yada, yada. So really, I just kind of focused on the main important parts that I just deemed to be important. So at the end of the day, I could just say, oh well, like, I think I got everything that I wanted to get out. So without a doubt, let's go on to say goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.